Now, Max Verstappen proved that he can be a serious contender to win the Formula One driver's title once again after holding off the McLaren challenge to win the Japanese Grand Prix.
Max Verstappen just reminded everyone why he's the best in the world. Check this video out.
To get more reaction to that, we're joined by Formula One journalist and author Nate Saunders. Nate, thank you so much for your time. Following the first two races, we thought this season could be a straight fight between the two McLarens for the title, but Verstappen made a real statement of intent with that win at Suzuka. What did you make of his performance?
Yeah, he did, didn't he? I mean, Max Verstappen's pretty inevitable. I think a lot of us have been saying that all season, that it looks like a straight fight between the McLarens, but Christian Horner said it himself, potentially the most perfect weekend of Max Verstappen's career so far. He took pole position when, honestly, nobody in Suzuka expected to see a Red Bull starting that race from first, and then was able to convert it. And amazingly, he's a point behind Norris in the championship, which, given how the year's gone so far, seems scarcely believable. So yeah, a special performance from Verstappen, and I think Christian Horner summed it up the best way. He said he proved all weekend why he has the number one on his car, and there were just superlatives from all over the place. Fernando Alonso spoke very highly of him as well. So yeah, it does seem like Verstappen is just a guy who can do things that not a lot of other drivers can do, week to week. And I think that that's what's making this dynamic at the front so interesting this year.
Verstappen almost collide with Norris out of the pits, and Verstappen joked that Norris had an expensive lawnmower after cutting the grass on the exit of the pits. But was Max right not to be punished?
Yeah, I think so. I think the stewards got that spot on. In fact, they didn't even look at it. They usually they'll note an incident, they'll have a look, and they'll come back. And they didn't even decide to do that. So it just shows you. I mean, if you look at the footage, Verstappen is pretty much driving straight out there, and Norris, he is released alongside, but never really in front. So I think the interesting thing there was that Norris basically after the race admitted, yeah, that was fair what Max did. I think in the heat of the moment in the car, he felt he'd been wronged quite badly. But yeah, I think that was just one of those racing incidents that seems to happen. And I thought for a little moment it might be the flashpoint between Norris and Verstappen that we've all been waiting for. We saw a few last year, but it kind of cooled over, and they were having quite a good joke about it at the end, like you said.
Is anyone really surprised by Max's dominance in Suzuka? This is a circuit that rewards precision and confidence, and Verstappen delivered a masterclass. When even the pundits didn't expect a Red Bull on pole, Max made sure to rewrite the narrative. Can we really talk about a title fight if one driver is operating on a completely different level?
Yeah, now Max mentioned the cooler conditions probably favored Red Bull. How do you rate his title chances this season then?
Very highly. I think, whenever Max is in Formula One, for the foreseeable future, I think he's got to be considered a title contender, especially when he can do things with the car that we can see him do at the weekend. I think the thing with Max is that he clearly isn't happy with this Red Bull car at the moment, but I think that it is competitive. There's this question in the paddock about how bad or how good the car is, and it's hard to judge that because we've never really had a good reference point from his teammate. But there is a feeling that Max can kind of outperform that car. What he needs to be a contender throughout the season is for Red Bull to improve that car as they go, because we've seen McLaren has been the benchmark team to beat all season long so far, and he can't just rely, or rather Red Bull can't just rely on Max Verstappen being Max Verstappen all season. At some point over a season so long, you have to give him the car that can match week to week. So I think it's high, and I think that Red Bull, we've seen time and time again, Red Bull upgrade good cars, build good cars, etc. They've just got to stay on that course this season. But I think that leaving the paddock at Suzuka yesterday, the feeling was that while many of us went into that weekend thinking it looks like a fight between the two McLarens out in front, there's a third person in that fight now, definitely, and that's Max Verstappen. So yeah, I think that he's got as good a chance of winning as Lando, as Oscar, and another reason for that as well is obviously that he has that experience. He's won 4 championships on the bounce, and I think that right now there's nobody you'd put close to him as the best driver in Formula One. So yeah, he's got to be considered a favourite for sure.
Max Verstappen isn't just in the title fight, he's redefining it. While others rely on perfect weekends and optimal conditions, Max adapts and over-delivers, even when the car isn't ideal. That's why he remains the benchmark, even in a year where McLaren has shown serious pace.
Let's come on to Lewis Hamilton, because it's been a difficult start for him at Ferrari, finishing 7th behind teammate Charles Leclerc. How big a concern is this for Hamilton and Ferrari?
Yeah, I think it's quite big. I mean, look, it's early days yet still, and I don't think Lewis Hamilton joined Ferrari to win, any of the first few races. He did get that sprint win, obviously, in China, a race ago. But yeah, Ferrari does seem to be in a little bit of trouble compared to, the likes of Red Bull, the likes of Mercedes, even who've looked a bit stronger. And I think the biggest concern so far is that he's that step behind. Now, I don't think after 3 races anyone's going to be really making any crazy statements about where they're at. But I think that the problem that you have with Ferrari is that when you put somebody like Lewis Hamilton in that mix with Ferrari, the feeling is immediately they need to be fighting for wins and championships straight off the gate. And I think Lewis was very careful not to say that he could do that. He wanted to do that, but he said, I don't know whether I can do that straight out of the gate. So he's always talked about 2026 as well, which obviously he has a contract for 2 seasons there. But I think that what will be interesting is when we get into the European season, the first race in Europe is Imola, a race in Italy. And if they're still not on the podium there, if they're still struggling and flailing behind those other teams, I think that's when the key thing happens at Ferrari, and that's when they're in trouble, is the Italian media turns on them. And that hasn't happened yet, but as soon as that does happen, that's when I think Lewis Hamilton maybe looks across and thinks, did I make the right decision to do this? Because Mercedes have looked quite strong so far.
Ferrari took a big swing bringing Lewis in, but the early signs aren't promising. He's trailing Leclerc, and the team still looks a step behind Red Bull and even Mercedes. Meanwhile, Max is maximizing every single race, even when the car isn't perfect. It's the difference between potential and precision, and right now, Max is all precision.
Yeah, just briefly, Nate, Yuki Tsunoda struggled on his debut for Red Bull after taking over from Liam Lawson. How did you see his race, and what will his team expect from Tsunoda for the rest of the season?
Yeah, it was really sad to see that, actually, because he started the weekend really well. In Friday practice, he was a 10th behind Max in both sessions, which Red Bull were pretty amazed by because he just jumped in the car, was pretty quick straight away. But I think in qualifying, you saw really what the story of all of those teammates that Max Verstappen has had come to the surface again. Yuki just got a lap wrong in Q2, went a bit hot into turn 1, messed the whole lap up, didn't make it through, ended up down the order, and as we saw, wasn't a great race, couldn't really overtake, and he just was stuck there for the whole event. Max obviously went off and did what Max Verstappen does, took pole and took the win. The thing was, talking to people at Red Bull, they were impressed with what they saw. The feedback from Yuki was good. The raw pace they saw was much better than what they were seeing from Liam Lawson. So disappointment for him because he really wanted to at least finish in the points in his home race. But I think he's got a much easier race in terms of circuit, in terms of challenge in Bahrain coming up this weekend. And I think actually for Yuki, given the fact that he was kind of dropped in there in the way he was, I don't think anybody was expecting any miracles from him. So I think this weekend is a better race to look at, to see how he's doing, to see how he's faring. And everybody I spoke to at Red Bull expects that, nobody's thinking Yuki's going to be up there challenging Max for wins. Like, that's not what they want from Yuki Tsunoda. They just want consistency. And I think they're going to expect to start seeing that this weekend. And I certainly do as well, because I think Yuki proved during those first sessions that he's not overawed by the challenge. It was just one lap in qualifying, really, that had a pretty big negative impact on his whole weekend.
Right, great stuff. Thank you so much, Nate.
What Yuki showed on Friday was encouraging, but not unique. We've seen others start strong in practice, only to crumble under qualifying pressure. And that's where Max Verstappen is just untouchable. His ability to string together perfect laps in high-pressure moments is what makes him elite. Red Bull isn't expecting Yuki to win, they just need him to not implode. Consistency is the goal, and Bahrain will be the real test of whether Yuki can settle into that role.